Welcome once again to these studies in the Gospel of Mark, or as the author calls it, the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. Today we look together at a longer passage, Mark chapter 5 verses 1 to 20, so let me begin by reading it to you. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man had lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his feet in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name's Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding nearby on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Now, we've already seen that in the section of Mark's Gospel running from chapter 4 verse 35 to 5 verse 43, a number of incidents are recorded in which Jesus demonstrated his miraculous powers. In our previous study, we saw that Jesus calmed what we described there as the perfect storm and demonstrated his power over the created order, but tantalizingly also hinted that his victory included his defeat of the malevolent dark forces that are at work in our world. In the light of this, it appears that the present incident is carefully chosen by Mark to demonstrate clearly Jesus' authority over these spiritual powers that are opposed to God. There is much in the story that is puzzling, and short of our having been present and to have cross-examined Jesus, we may be left with questions to which we have no apparent answers. However, Mark's lack of interest in answering our questions suggests that he wants us to concentrate on the vital, central and clear truths about Jesus revealed in this remarkable incident. So we do well to follow Mark's lead. What this passage does remind us is that our world is in the grip of malevolent spiritual powers. Universally, religions have always and continue to recognize this, and many of the practices of cults and religions are designed to avoid the pain and destruction that such powers bring. Even those who believe themselves to be sufficiently sophisticated not to need religion still seem to recognize something that often fights against the good and true, and they live out such battles in films and video games. Mark rarely goes into much detail in telling his account of Jesus' ministry. However, in the present story, Mark emphasizes this poor man's condition. He lived among the dead, was unnaturally strong and untamable. His condition then was one which demonstrated that the world of demonic powers at their worst enslave those in whom they gain control, and such control leads to inevitable ruin. Here, however, Mark especially notices that these dark powers assemble against Jesus. This is demonstrated in a number of ways in the present passage. Thus, while we must be careful that we do not give credence to demonic lies, the appeal to the name Legion may be a reference to their claim to irresistible power and unity. So they imply Jesus is entering their sphere of power and they're letting him know this. It's as if they're saying to him, "Come no further unless at your own peril." Yet the story shows that this is really mock bravado. For these demons have no doubt as to the one before whom they have been brought face to face. He is, as they say, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God. They did not need persuading that Jesus was God incarnate. In fact, Jesus makes no efforts to expel them from the man. They're only too keen to leave Jesus' presence. What is interesting is that this event took place in what is described as the region of the Gerasenes. This was on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee in an area called the Decapolis. This was not a Jewish region, but one that was known as Gentile territory, a place, in other words, where non-Jews lived, following pagan religions. Yet even outside Jewish lands, Jesus' power over the powers of spiritual darkness prove unabated, and Jesus banishes satanic darkness. Despite their number and their bluster, even there the demons are seen as abject and powerless before Jesus, and the man who had been so much in their thrall is completely restored. The sequel is perhaps surprising. As soon as the local inhabitants are briefed as to what has happened, they beg Jesus to leave, more concerned apparently for the loss of their pigs than the remarkable demonstration of what Jesus can do to restore the man who had been plunged into demonic darkness. One suspects that Mark offers this detail of the response of the Gerasenes to Jesus because he wants to remind his readers that our response to the remarkable eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life can sometimes be the same. Self-interest, materialism, and the disturbance of a familiar way of thinking and living is just as much evidence of bondage into which the world and its inhabitants still fall as it was for this man. And such can shape our reaction to such awesome events. It's probably true that most people do not reject Jesus because of the lack of evidence for who he claims to be, but very simply because his teaching and the claims he puts on our lives are simply too disturbing in every sense of that word. And yet the invitation remains for every one of us, and the person delivered from bondage to the powers of spiritual darkness continues to challenge us too. For our world is not very different. Sometimes today we encounter cases of demonic possession, but they are merely an extreme example of the overall bondage into which the world and even we ourselves can find ourselves led. Addicted to those things that sap the life out of us and ultimately destroy us. But the point of this story is that it shows that Jesus is able to free us from those very things that bind us. There can in fact be no doubt that the man preferred to be delivered. It comes as no surprise then that he wanted to remain with Jesus. However, Jesus had a greater purpose for him. He left behind this transformed person as his missionary among a people who had revealed the darkness of their own souls by driving Jesus away. Interestingly, however, when Jesus next visited the area, and where he fed 4,000 people with 7 loaves and a few small fish, he received a warm welcome. Even resistant Decapolis was not impervious to his good news. Perhaps daily faced with the remarkably restored man and his vibrant testimony, they were forced to give Jesus a second thought. And that may be the last point to be made here. Jesus is ready to give a second chance to those who first rejected him, to those who eventually saw beyond what they thought was their own self-interest, and began to suspect that the new life seen in this man, delivered from demonic possession, might just be what they, and frankly, what you and I, really need.